In recent times, the digital landscape has been electrified by extraordinary headlines, with claims circulating that the Iraqi dinar is on the verge of a monumental surge to a value of over $5, and the Vietnamese Dong is purportedly set to revalue at nearly $4. These figures are not just ambitious. They represent a fundamental reimagining of these currencies' places in the global financial order. Such claims inevitably capture attention and spark widespread discussion, prompting many to wonder about the mechanisms that could facilitate such a transformation. Our purpose today is to move beyond the sensational headlines and engage in a thorough, fact-based examination of these narratives. We will dissect the economic fundamentals of both Iraq and Vietnam, explore the established principles of currency valuation, and provide a clear framework for understanding what constitutes plausible economic change versus speculative fantasy, helping you to discern fact from fiction in a noisy information environment. To fully grasp the magnitude of these viral assertions, it is essential to place them in the context of current market realities. At present, one United States dollar exchanges for approximately 1,400 Iraqi dinars. The proposition that the dinar could not only achieve parity with the dollar, but soar to a value of $5.20, represents a valuation increase of many thousands of percent. This is not a simple adjustment or a minor fluctuation. It would be a seismic event in international finance, an unprecedented recalibration of an entire nation's currency. Similarly, the Vietnamese Dong currently trades at a rate where thousands of units are required to equal a single US dollar. The idea that its value could leap to nearly $4 per dong is equally staggering, suggesting a shift so profound it defies conventional economic modeling. These are the kinds of numbers that demand rigorous scrutiny, compelling us to ask a critical question: are these figures rooted in any discernible economic trajectory, or are they artifacts of digital rumor mills? Let's begin our analysis with the economic landscape of Iraq. The nation's economy is overwhelmingly tethered to a single commodity, oil. Revenue generated from the export of crude oil forms the bedrock of the government's budget and constitutes the vast majority of its foreign exchange earnings. This deep dependency means that the value of the Iraqi dinar is intrinsically linked to the fluctuating price of oil on the global market, international energy demand, and Iraq's consistent ability to produce and export its resources. Beyond the oil sector, a host of other critical factors come into play, including the state of political stability, national security, the quality of its infrastructure, and the effectiveness of its governance structures. Any disruption in these areas, whether from internal conflict, policy instability, or logistical breakdowns, can exert significant downward pressure on the currency's value. Therefore, any hypothesis of a dramatic appreciation in the dinar would first require monumental and sustained improvements across this entire spectrum of economic and political factors. Consider, for a moment, the hypothetical scenario where the Iraqi dinar abruptly revalues to over $5. The immediate consequences for the Iraqi economy would be complex and potentially devastating. While a stronger dinar would make imported goods significantly cheaper for Iraqi consumers, it would concurrently make Iraq's exports, most notably oil, astronomically expensive for international buyers. A foreign nation accustomed to paying for Iraqi oil in dollars would suddenly face a price multiplied many times over. This would likely cause a catastrophic collapse in demand for Iraqi exports, as buyers would swiftly turn to more affordable alternatives on the global market. The resulting plummet in export revenue would severely damage government finances, deplete foreign currency reserves, and destabilize the entire economic foundation of the country. In essence, such a drastic and sudden revaluation, far from being a solution, would risk shattering the very economic structures it is purported to fix, illustrating that sustainable currency strength is built on balanced economic health, not sudden shocks. This kind of transformative currency revaluation simply does not occur in a vacuum or overnight as the result of a secret decree. For such a change to be implemented without causing catastrophic economic collapse, it would necessitate a meticulously crafted long-term strategic plan. This plan would require broad support and validation from international markets and financial institutions. It would involve a fundamental diversification of the Iraqi economy away from its near-total reliance on oil, the development of robust non-oil sectors, and the cultivation of a stable and predictable political environment that invites foreign investment. Such a process is the work of decades, not days, and involves transparent policy reforms, fiscal discipline, and the gradual building of market confidence. It is a marathon of institutional reform and economic development, not a sprint fueled by speculation. The journey to a stronger, more stable dinar is one paved with tangible progress in governance and economic diversification, a reality far removed from the narrative of an instantaneous, miraculous revaluation. Now, let's shift our focus to Southeast Asia and examine the case of the Vietnamese Dong. Vietnam's economy presents a different profile from Iraq's, characterized by a dynamic and rapidly expanding manufacturing sector. The nation has become a global powerhouse in the export of a diverse range of goods, including electronics, textiles, industrial machinery, and agricultural products. This vibrant export activity is a primary driver of the country's economic growth, bringing in substantial amounts of foreign currency and creating underlying demand for the dong. At present, the Vietnamese government actively manages its currency's exchange rate, implementing policies to maintain stability and predictability for its export-oriented economy. This means the dong's value is not determined solely by free market forces, but is influenced by the State Bank of Vietnam to prevent excessive volatility and support national economic objectives. This context of a managed exchange rate is crucial for understanding any potential future changes in its valuation, a recurring theme within the speculative narratives surrounding the dong is the assertion that the International Monetary Fund, IMF, is actively supporting a plan for Vietnam to transition to a more freely floating exchange rate. On the surface, this claim contains an element of truth. The IMF generally advocates for countries to adopt more market-determined exchange rate systems as their economies mature. However, the interpretation of what this support entails is often vastly exaggerated in viral posts. The IMF's role is typically advisory, providing technical assistance and guidance to help a country manage such a transition smoothly. This process involves the gradual relaxation of controls, the establishment of safety nets to absorb shocks, and the careful coordination of currency policy with broader fiscal and monetary strategies. It is a process designed to enhance stability, not to unleash chaos. The IMF's involvement would be about ensuring a measured, predictable evolution, not endorsing a wild, overnight surge in value. The practical implementation of a more flexible, or floating, exchange rate for the Vietnamese dong would be a carefully managed affair. Instead of completely relinquishing control, the government would likely transition by first allowing the currency to fluctuate within a predefined trading band. The central bank would retain the authority to intervene in the market, buying or selling currency. If the dong's value moves too rapidly or threatens to breach the boundaries of this band, thereby preventing extreme volatility. Over an extended period, if Vietnam's economy continues its strong performance, with rising exports and growing investor confidence, the dong could be expected to appreciate gradually. A 10 or 15% increase in value over several years might be considered a significant and successful outcome of such a policy shift. The notion that this managed liberalization would result in the dong soaring to a value of nearly $4 per unit is a scenario that is completely disconnected from the principles and practices of modern currency management. To properly analyze these claims, it's essential to understand the fundamental mechanics of how currency valuations are determined in the real world. Exchange rates are not arbitrary numbers. They are the product of a complex interplay of numerous economic forces. Key factors include a country's interest rates relative to others, its inflation rate, and its trade balance, the difference between the value of its exports and imports. Furthermore, flows of foreign investment, the level of political stability, and the overall confidence investors have in a country's governance all play a pivotal role. When a government chooses to artificially fix or peg its currency's value, it must maintain substantial foreign reserves to buy or sell its currency on the open market to defend that fixed rate. Over time, if the underlying economic fundamentals diverge significantly from the pegged value, maintaining that peg becomes increasingly difficult and unsustainable, often prompting a gradual transition toward a more flexible system. Let's delve deeper into the critical relationship between interest rates and inflation, two pillars of currency valuation. If a nation experiences high inflation, the purchasing power of its currency erodes, meaning each unit of currency buys fewer goods and services. This decline in real value naturally makes the currency less attractive to hold, and investors will tend to avoid it. To counteract this and attract foreign capital, A country's central bank might raise interest rates, offering a higher return on investments denominated in that currency. However, this action comes with a trade-off, as higher interest rates can also slow down domestic economic growth by making borrowing more expensive for businesses and consumers. Conversely, if a currency is widely expected to strengthen, foreign investors might pour capital into the country to benefit from the appreciation, which in turn can push its value even higher. However, these capital flows are contingent on stability and predictable returns. Wild, unpredictable swings in value deter serious, long-term investment. Another indispensable component in the equation of currency management is the size of a nation's central bank reserves. These reserves, typically held in stable foreign currencies like the US dollar, euro, or yen, serve as a critical buffer. A country contemplating a significant shift in its currency policy, such as moving from a fixed to a floating exchange rate, must possess ample reserves to manage the transition and defend against potential instability. For instance, if a currency comes under a speculative attack, where a large number of investors begin betting against it and selling it off, the central bank must be able to step in and sell its foreign reserves to buy back its own currency, thereby supporting its value. If these reserves are insufficient, the central bank's ability to maintain stability is compromised, and the entire currency framework could collapse. Consequently, any nation like Vietnam or Iraq planning a major currency overhaul would spend years building up massive reserves and communicating its intentions clearly to the market. Given these economic principles, we must then ask, who is behind the propagation of these extraordinary claims about the dinar and dong? Often, the source can be traced back to individuals or groups promoting speculative investment schemes in exotic currencies. The narrative of an imminent massive revaluation is a powerful marketing tool used to generate excitement and encourage people to purchase these currencies with the promise of life-changing returns. The phenomenon is amplified by the nature of social media, where hype and the fear of missing out, FOMO, can drive information to go viral, encouraging individuals to act impulsively without conducting thorough research. These claims frequently lack any form of credible substantiation, often citing vague sources such as unnamed officials or secret intelligence. However, genuine large-scale economic shifts are not predicated on clandestine rumors. They are built on transparent data, international agreements, comprehensive reforms, and the passage of time. Furthermore, a significant red flag that casts doubt on these viral narratives is the conspicuous silence of the mainstream financial media and professional economic analysts. A currency revaluation of the magnitude being claimed for the dinar or the dong would be one of the biggest financial stories of the decade. It would trigger immediate and massive reactions in global markets. Reputable news organizations like Bloomberg, Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, and the Financial Times would be providing constant, in-depth coverage. Central banks, governments, and major financial institutions around the world would be publishing detailed statements, risk assessments, and economic forecasts related to the event. The fact that we see none of this is telling. Instead, the discussion is almost entirely confined to speculative social media posts, online forums, and unverified videos. This stark inconsistency between the gravity of the claims and the lack of coverage from credible financial authorities should serve as a powerful reason for skepticism, a crucial practical consideration that is often overlooked in these speculative discussions is the issue of liquidity and convertibility. Even in the highly improbable event that a currency like the dinar or dong were to appreciate dramatically, an investor's ability to convert those holdings back into a major currency like the US dollar is not guaranteed. Currencies that are not widely traded, often referred to as exotic or illiquid currencies, typically face significant hurdles in the foreign exchange market. These can include extremely wide bid-ask spreads, meaning there is a large difference between the price at which you can buy the currency and the price at which you can sell it. Furthermore, many commercial banks may not support transactions in these currencies, and there may be government-imposed restrictions or regulatory obstacles to moving money out of the country. These factors mean that even if a currency shows a significant gain on paper, realizing that profit in a usable form can be an entirely different and often difficult challenge. This brings us to a helpful checklist for maintaining a grounded perspective when encountering such claims. First, always look for official statements from the central bank or the finance ministry of the country in question. These institutions are the primary sources for any legitimate information regarding currency policy. Second, consult a wide range of reputable, mainstream financial news outlets and economic research publications to see if they are reporting on the matter. Third, take the time to examine the key economic indicators for the country, such as its inflation rate, the status of its foreign reserves, its trade balance, and its levels of foreign direct investment. Fourth, understand that genuine currency reforms are typically implemented as part of a coordinated, phased policy package, not as an abrupt, standalone event. Finally, it is a sound principle to never base significant financial decisions solely on unsubstantiated rumors circulating on social media or on promises of guaranteed overnight wealth. There is also a powerful psychological dimension at play that makes these narratives so compelling. When people hear claims of a $5 dinar or a $4 dong, it can trigger a potent emotional response. It taps into the universal dream of turning a very small investment into a life-altering windfall, seemingly with little effort. This prospect of free money can be incredibly alluring. The powerful emotions of greed and the fear of being left behind can easily override rational, critical analysis, leading individuals to make decisions based on hype rather than on facts. This is why it is so important to consciously anchor any evaluation of these claims in verifiable data and credible analysis. The world of finance is complex, and decisions driven by sensationalism rather than by a sober assessment of economic realities can often lead to unfavorable outcomes. Being aware of these psychological triggers is the first step in navigating the information landscape with a clear and objective mind, despite the highly speculative nature of the viral claims. There is a positive takeaway from this increased focus on nations like Iraq and Vietnam. The very fact that these countries are the subject of so much discussion indicates that global investors and observers are paying closer attention to the potential of emerging markets. This attention in itself can be beneficial. Both nations possess significant long-term potential for economic growth. Vietnam has successfully positioned itself as a formidable manufacturing and export hub within Asia, while Iraq holds some of the world's most valuable oil and energy resources. If these countries can continue on a path of improving their governance, enhancing political stability, and strengthening their trade relationships with the rest of the world, their economies will grow, and as a natural consequence, their currencies could strengthen over time. This potential strengthening, however, would be the result of real, sustained progress, not the outcome of a secret, instantaneous financial reset. It is also important to understand that the modern global financial system is built on a foundation of interconnectedness and transparency, making the idea of a secret, large-scale currency reset fundamentally implausible. National currencies are intrinsically linked through a vast network of international trade, banking systems, and multinational agreements that involve hundreds of public and private institutions across the globe. A change as monumental as the revaluation of a country's entire currency could never happen quietly or behind closed doors. The ripple effects would be instantaneous and far-reaching, impacting trade balances, international contracts, and financial markets worldwide. If a $5 dinar or a $4 dong were a genuine, imminent possibility, the signs would be visible everywhere. From the trading floors of New York and London to the policy statements of the World Bank, the fact that the conversation is confined to rumor-based channels is perhaps the most telling evidence of its nature. Here is a helpful rule of thumb for anyone considering the world of currency investing in the current environment. If a proposition sounds too good to be true, it almost invariably is. The accumulation of real, sustainable wealth is typically the result of long-term understanding, patient education, and prudent decision-making, not of chasing viral promises of overnight riches. For those who are genuinely interested in the foreign exchange market, the path forward involves diligent learning. This means taking the time to study how exchange rates actually work, researching the specific economic, political, and social dynamics of each country, and following the analysis of credible financial experts and institutions. Relying on emotionally charged online videos or sensationalized headlines is not a substitute for rigorous, independent research. A foundation of knowledge is the most reliable tool for navigating the complexities of global finance and making informed choices. So, setting aside the fantastical claims, is there any plausible upside for the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong? The answer is yes, but it lies in the realm of gradual, long-term appreciation, not explosive revaluation. If Vietnam continues to solidify its position as a key manufacturing hub, attract significant foreign investment, modernize its infrastructure, and successfully manage inflation while gradually liberalizing its currency policy. The dong could certainly gain moderate strength over a period of many years. Similarly, for the dinar, if Iraq can make substantial progress in addressing its challenges with governance, enhancing security, rebuilding its infrastructure, and successfully diversifying its economy beyond oil, its currency might see a slow and steady recovery. These are long-term scenarios dependent on the successful implementation of complex, difficult reforms. Any potential gains would be incremental, reflecting the real-world pace of national development, a far cry from the overnight windfalls promised in viral posts. What then is a prudent course of action for someone who finds themselves tempted by these compelling viral claims? The first step is to commit to thorough due diligence. This means resisting the urge to act impulsively based on a headline or a social media post. Instead, one should actively seek out independent analysis from professional economists, major financial institutions, and the official publications of central banks. It is also important to understand the significant risks involved in speculating on illiquid currencies, which include the potential for large losses, the difficulty of converting the currency back to a usable form, and the lack of regulatory protections that are common in more established markets. A healthy dose of skepticism is invaluable. When a financial proposition promises extraordinary returns with little to no risk, it is almost always a sign to proceed with extreme caution and to question the underlying claims with rigor and scrutiny. In closing, the dramatic narratives proposing a $5 Iraqi dinar and a nearly $4 Vietnamese dong are, based on all available economic evidence and principles, extremely unlikely to materialize. These figures function as powerful attention-grabbing headlines, but they are not grounded in the sound logic and established mechanics of the global financial system. Real, sustainable change in a currency's value is a gradual process, driven by the strengthening of national institutions, the implementation of clear and consistent economic policies, and the disciplined functioning of markets. Before accepting or acting upon any such extraordinary claims, it is essential to examine the verifiable facts, question the sources of the information, and understand the fundamental economic forces at play. True insight into the world of currencies comes from clear, factual analysis, not from speculative rumors, and by focusing on the former, we can all become more informed participants in these important global conversations. This brings us to the conclusion that while both Iraq and Vietnam hold considerable economic potential for the future, the path to realizing that potential and seeing it reflected in their currency valuations is a long and methodical one. It requires years of dedicated effort in building diversified economies, fostering stable and transparent governance, and integrating smoothly into the global financial community. The stories of sudden, secret reevaluations, while captivating, distract from the real and often challenging work of nation-building and economic development that is required for a currency to gain lasting strength and credibility on the world stage. By understanding this distinction between overnight fantasy and long-term reality, we can better appreciate the true economic journeys of these nations and analyze their progress through a lens of informed and realistic expectations. The journey of a currency from a low valuation to a position of strength is a reflection of a nation's overall progress. It mirrors improvements in education, infrastructure, technology, and political stability. For Vietnam, this means continuing to climb the manufacturing value chain, fostering innovation, and opening its markets in a controlled and strategic manner. For Iraq, it involves the monumental task of moving beyond an oil-based economy, developing new industries, and creating a secure environment that encourages both domestic and foreign investment. These are generational projects, and any corresponding currency appreciation would occur in small, incremental steps over a long period, signaling to the world that real, sustainable change is taking place. This gradual, earned strength is what a healthy economy strives for, not the chaotic disruption that a sudden artificial revaluation would cause. Therefore, when we see these claims circulating online, it is helpful to view them not as predictive financial analysis, but as a cultural phenomenon driven by the speed and reach of social media. They represent a modern form of financial folklore, stories that tap into a deep-seated desire for rapid wealth and hidden knowledge. Acknowledging them as such allows us to observe them with curiosity rather than taking them as actionable intelligence. The real story of the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong is being written not in secret chat rooms or on speculative websites, but in the policy documents of their governments, the economic data published by their central banks, and the daily work of their people to build more prosperous and stable societies for the future. Ultimately, the most valuable investment one can make is in knowledge and critical thinking, the ability to distinguish between credible information and unsubstantiated hype is a crucial skill in today's information-saturated world, particularly when it comes to financial matters. The tales of the dinar and the dong serve as a perfect case study in the importance of this skill. They remind us that the global economy operates on principles of cause and effect, data and transparent policy, not on magic or mystery. By grounding our understanding in these principles, we can engage with news about any currency, from the US dollar to the Vietnamese Dong, with confidence and clarity, separating the plausible from the impossible and making sense of a complex world.